Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. And more importantly, Happy New Year. That's right. It is a new year. It is 2025. And today, because it is 2025, we are going to go over our garden goals from last year. So every year, we go through and we say, hey, did we meet our goals? Did we make goals and do we meet them? And it's kind of fun because I don't know, Batavia, you tell me, do you remember your goals every year?
No, and I think that after so many years of doing this, that should be the commitment. Like that has to be a goal to look at the goals because, dude, it's again embarrassing. So no, I didn't look at them until I was prepping for this show.
Yeah, Leonard was nice enough to send the goals over to Batavia, so she will be running it because I don't know if I've met him or not, which is always the fun part because I think it really shows like, are we serious about our goals? Are we really, did we think them through and follow through like we wanted to for the year?
Yeah. I think it also helps when we kind of go over them, especially at this time, because it, I think for me, helps me kind of reel in some of the goals and making them more realistic. So when I go through the ones that I made versus the ones that I didn't, there's some like underlying causes as to why. Like
Right.
maybe it wasn't the most realistic. What maybe I really wasn't ready for that goal. And I think
Yeah.
it's okay to, even if you're mid season saying you're gonna, push a goal out, but you gotta have to know what the goals are to be able to do that,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. But these are really pivotal for our gardens because we use the time in the off season to really look at it and go through, and then we make a decision. And these aren't just little itty bitty goals. A lot of times these are pretty big changes or pretty big things that we have in mind for our gardens. So it keeps us on track and keeps us to where we can really make, hopefully, a long-term change for our garden. At least that's been the trend for the past couple years.
Yeah, yeah.
So, all right. Well, everybody, first of all, this is the Backyard Gardens podcast. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by buying some seeds. So, our seeds are available in our seed shop. Check them out below. The code, which is available, I believe, until about February, is YBBBB. And that will give you a discount. Free shipping on orders $35 or more. We have an Amazon list down below that will shows all of our products that we use and we recommend for your garden. So check that out and become a patron or a subscriber. We do extra episodes every month, and as soon as we unlock it on YouTube, we will put the videos of the subscriber only episodes on YouTube. So please check that out and follow us on YouTube. Why not, right? It's just a party over here.
Come on down.
Come on now. All right. Who do you want to go first? So your Batavia's in control of this one, so she gets to decide who goes first.
Once a year, I get this joy. As I rub my hands together in that villainous way. So I'm going to go first.
Wow. She can't change, everybody. It's just what it is.
So we did four goals each, and we did an honorable mention. And if you listen to last week's episode where we actually walked through these goals, you could hear like our intentions and you could hear how gung ho we were about them. And then, you'll be listening to this week's episode and you'll know what's real, right? So some of us, maybe mostly Ben, commented on some of my goals and he kind of piggybacked on them. So technically, he probably has more than four. All right. So my
That's
first
rude.
one, yeah, he can't help himself. My first one was planning, and I remember making a note of this goal. So I wrote it as start the things inside, like literally start them things inside, meaning starting seeds inside. Finalize the garden plan at least 6 weeks before the start of the season. This is where it got tricky and probably too technical for kind of my style. So seasons being spring, summer, and fall. And we talked a little bit about kind of why that made sense. 6 weeks was just a nice round number. So that meant by like February, I needed to know and finalize what I was going to plan for spring. In May, I needed to be final with summer. And then in August, I needed to be final when it comes to my fall plantings. Now, I got like a C on this goal. Like I started them things inside, and then the accuracy of meeting the goal kind of trailed off.
So
Right.
we're stepping it up a level and giving ourselves a grade this year.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't want to do that. That's not
and
fun.
that's on a curve, and that's generous because I'm running things, so I get to say, and it's written in blue ink, not red ink. You
Oh,
know,
okay,
I
okay.
really was, yeah. Um, so first, the goal was flawed. I like this idea of giving myself some room where I'm not, focusing on my garden plan for the entire year. That's kind of a cheat to begin with because I struggle with like this is what I'm going to do for the full year. So it was kind of a cheat, but I'm kind of meeting myself where I have been. But the flaw is spring, meaning finalize what I'm growing for. I want to grow for spring in February, and if you skip down to finalize what I want to grow for fall by August the 11th, both of those dates are really late,
Yeah.
right? So let's say if we even take summer. So summer, I'm looking at my notes here. May the 10th, it's saying you need to be final with your summer. It doesn't mean you're starting, but you need to finalize it. There are things that, generally speaking, I could be starting for summer on May 10th, but I kind of need to already have that worked out.
Right.
So I still like the idea of breaking it up into seasons, but I was not conservative enough when it comes to like the deadline, So it's more like finalize spring in January. More like your summer needs to be finalized like probably March at the latest. And one could argue you probably
That's
know what you're doing for fall by then anyway.
yeah. Yeah, that I mean that's that I'm going to argue that. But even still there's a delay. Um do you think, and I know, so we're not coming out right away with our 2025 goals. We're going to take a little bit, really consider them and bring them out to you guys, but a little preview. Do you think this is something that you would maybe continue to tweak and
I,
make it a
I think
goal,
I'm
or kind of keep it within that realm? You know what I mean?
I think that it's probably one of my bigger struggles, the
Yeah.
planning and the timing around the planning. So there are several layers. It's not just the finalize, the actual planning for that particular season, like what you're going to plant. It also should be like when I'm going to start things, when I'm going to put things out, like all of that is wound up into it. And those are still two areas I struggle with. So it has to remain on my list.
Right.
Whether or not it's going to make like the top 4 or 5 for the show, I'm not sure. So I think with what, if I'm really honest, I remember starting the seeds as the goal. I remember the early part of the season, like really early, that I was going to do like each season. By the time we got to summer, I forgot all about that. I didn't even remember until I read the goal that Leonard sent that I was supposed to know what I was doing for fall by any date, let alone August.
Right.
So there was really no chance. Like I would have had to really stumble into that goal, which I didn't. This fall was all in. It was pretty much a flop for me.
Was it?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, as of right now, do you have anything growing in your garden right now?
No.
Okay. So your garden's
Well, I
asleep.
have garlic that's
Well,
ruminating.
yeah. But otherwise your garden's asleep.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Well, you opened up with a solid C
Hmm. Hmm.
within reason, so that's good.
Yeah. On a curve. Yeah.
All right,
All
what's my first goal?
right. So, ay, ay, ay.
Oh man,
All right,
don't
we're gonna get
start.
this out of the way. Be very vigilant on the wild things garden. So listen, I'm going to read this because I need all these folks to have the context. So let me look at the teleprompter. Because I'm like, I had this, I was insisting that he wrote this down as quotes. So need to really look at it this year and see how it's producing and make a decision about whether I'm going to move it next year. So this is you at the beginning of February of 2024 saying you're going to decide whether or not you're going to move it in 2025, right?
Yeah.
Keynotes. You made a point to say you're going to take the emotion out of it,
Yeah.
right? And then you said, and I don't know what this is, and I hope you remember, you hinted at a plan B if the Wild Things Garden doesn't work out. Like you had something in mind
Yeah.
then, but you were very intentional about, I'm not telling y'all.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah. So, and we've talked about it at nauseum on here, so I'm not gonna really harp on it too much. But first step is I absolutely took the emotion out of it. I remember going into the season and just looking at it and being like, "This is it." You know what I mean? And I kind of I went into the season knowing that
Yeah.
like this isn't really producing like I want, but let's see what happens. And then as it progressed, it got worse and worse. So the emotion of being attached to it didn't really sit long. The emotion that took over, quite frankly, was anger that I didn't go ahead and move that garden. You know, in the words of Martha Stewart, when in doubt, rip it out. And that's what I should have done. Should have just ripped it out. But I wanted to see, and a number of things actually happened. I guess I can kind of dive in a little bit into what I was seeing there. But what was going on was we planted carrots. I had winter carrots planted, and then I had one row of winter carrots, and then I came back and I planted another row of spring carrots. Well, first thing that happened was the spring carrots outpaced the winter carrots. So we took that off and said, okay, but even still, it just wasn't enough to get good growth out of them. So that was part of it. And then the tomatoes that we put in there really told the story. And what happened with those is the tomatoes they grew and then they just got tall and spindly. And I said, okay, the writing was on the wall at that point. And what I was referring to in that episode was the plan to move all of the gardens out front and expand it, but I didn't really want to publicly announce it because I didn't want any expectations on me. Because I
Yeah.
always want to leave an option open of like, do I even really want to do that? But I already have the investment in the wood and all that stuff and the irrigation. So it really did make sense. But the whole thing about the pond and all that, that wasn't even a thought. Not, I mean, it may have been like an inkling, but I had no clue in February how to go about that. So that wasn't even an option at all.
Mm.
But yeah, the whole thing about like what we were planning to do was I was going to move it. I just really trying to figure the layout.
Yeah.
That's the hold up. You know what I mean? And it's going to be a little bit of a project, but it is what it is. So I'm glad that that was actually on there, and I didn't even remember having that in my mind. But I absolutely remember in the spring sitting back and just watching it, and really evaluating how things were growing. And I remember sitting there, and I sat down in the garden, and I started thinking back like, how did it do the year before? And the year before, and the year before, and you know, I did have like a really good year, but after that, it's like I was just combating one thing after the other. So we're done with it. I'm not even watering it. I'm nothing. I'm just waiting to do the work that needs to be done, which I've got this urge to do now. So it may happen next week. I may start that process. I got the urge in a matter of like 30 seconds yesterday. I was standing out there and I was like, it needs to happen now. So we'll see how that goes.
So the key about my garden being asleep, when you all hear this, my garden will still be frozen as well, right?
Yeah.
We can pretty much predict that. And there's just a tinge of jealousy when you say, "Yeah, I may get out there and start working in the garden, next week."
Yeah,
Um,
but I mean, I'm just moving garden beds. I'm not
yeah,
planting
right.
anything or, you know, I'm literally, I mean, it's the crappy work. It's lifting up the frame, moving it, and then building because it's on a little bit of a slope. So then I've got to build underneath it. It's a project that I'm not really wanting to do, but it's going to get done.
See, those things make like that's when I like call upon Batavia the builder,
Yeah.
and I really feel like I'm doing,
Are
so
we adding another bee into it now?
I'll tell them there's so many more. So I do want to take just a moment because I know we talked about kind of in the last episodes of 2024, the Wild Things Garden a bit. When I saw this on the list, I thought like when you opened up the episode today, you talked about how important are these goals to us, although we're not looking back at the list, not by design, we just don't. We still for some of these like we work on them because they're important to us. And the Wild Things Garden is such a good example of that because we talked about that both on air and off all throughout the year.
Yeah.
Right. And again, you not seeing it, but that being a part of your reflection of 2024. when we closed out the year, like that's really telling. Like I actually also listened to the episode, right? So
Yeah.
last week's episode, last week's replay, and you can hear it in your voice, like you're going to give it one more go, but you weren't optimistic about it.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you mention the emotion part about it and removing the emotion, not that you carry a lot of emotion about the garden anyway. Like then when I think about our conversations in the second half of the year, they were absolutely emotionless. And I think you're also right about like just a little bit of annoyance. Like, let's be done with this already and move on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the emotion part comes in of like, I did all this work and it's in there and I don't want to throw it away and waste it
Hmm.
and all that stuff. So, there's definitely a bit of emotion in it, but for the most part, I mean, I had already been thinking about it and it just, I think one reason why I was able to follow through is because, I mean, we legit made the episode and then I walked out there and was like, no, and even like, I think I planted potatoes in there and they just didn't do well, which was
Hmm.
really odd, 2 years. And it sucks too, because it was my son's potato bed and it just
Oh,
didn't do good. So, it is what it is, but
yeah.
we'll, it's gonna happen. So yeah, I'm glad that was on there because if not, that would have been, I may have had some egg on my face. And that's always the trick behind these too, is like, did we actually even do anything? And we've been pretty good over the years, but as we
Yeah.
get deeper into it, I don't know.
And quiet is kept. That's one of the reasons, because there are a bunch of reasons why it takes me so long to develop the goals, because it's quite literally what am I willing to commit to in front of people.
Yeah.
And I know, you really shouldn't, you probably shouldn't, move around your life like that. Like, I only want to say I'm going to do it if I believe that I'm going to do it because now people have heard me say I'm going to do it. But I mean, that's just kind of real life, right? So this next one, it's funny because I stumbled into it and it's semi tied to the first one. For me, it's the stars of the garden are going to be root vegetables. It's going to be the year of the root, right? And so it's always the fine print, dedicating the equivalent to 2 raised beds worth of roots. And I put notes in carrots, sweet potatoes, meaning white potatoes, and onions as examples. And I stumbled into it because my garden plan already had root vegetables in it, probably by the time I made, this as a goal. But once I got into the growing season, completely forgot about it. So because my garden plan had it in there, I did meet the 2 raised beds, but I was intentional about it as it relates to the plan initially, and that's where it stopped. Like when you think about, okay, my fall planting, let's go back to my C plus, or maybe now even a C minus for the first goal. My fall plantings, I could have came back around with more root. Absolutely didn't, because I didn't tighten up my fall plan and fall kind of flopped for me. But it also feeds into what we've talked about in recent months when it comes to storage crops for me. So you could see why that was a goal. So I am still eating white potatoes and sweet potatoes from the garden, and we are basically wrapped up with the onions. There's a shelf life for them. Um, so I'm pleased with that, right? And I don't know that it's going to be on the goal list, but it's definitely something I'm going to continue to try to do in my garden based
Yeah.
on the things we've talked about.
Well, that's good. I mean, you definitely knocked it out of the park with your sweet potatoes this year.
Mhm.
And
Very
you're
pleased.
still eating white potatoes, so that's good. Did you do carrots?
I did carrots and I didn't mention them in this recap.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Good talk. Good talk.
I did carrots. I didn't, I planted them in a really small space, 2 by 4 foot space right next to the garage. And again, forgetting that they were kind of the goal, I only planted them once in the spring. They did just okay. I didn't thin them. And so, like, things are all kind of twisted up. I did had an okay harvest, but I've had mixed results. I've read that you're supposed to leave them dry. Don't wash them if you plan on storing them in the refrigerator. And then I've seen people wash them. So I washed them. And here's the breaking news: I had so many of those carrots mold in the refrigerator. I've not said this out loud in public or even to myself when I talk to myself at home. I haven't said it then. It's just like more than half of the carrots that I pulled in, which would have been like midsummer. Yeah, they were no good.
So I'm taking notes. So now that we're on YouTube, everybody can see when I take notes. It can get kind of insane. When
And
I do it,
ironically, you didn't know about that, and thanks for putting me on the spot. It would have came out at
well, you
some
didn't
point
have
in
to
the
say
bed.
anything. I
Yeah,
mean,
of course I
look.
did, but here we are.
So two things. One, you were saying, and it is hard because we're held accountable for what we say sometimes and what we
Mhm.
say we're going to do. So that's difficult. And then two, you're under the scrutiny of the public eye a little bit.
Mhm,
So
mhm, mhm.
that makes it difficult.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is for my carrots, what I do is I wash them real good and then I
Mhm.
dry them and then I put them in a bag, and you can put like a damp paper towel in there or something, and just put them in the fridge, and they do last a fair amount of time. So
I've
I,
had carrots last before,
yeah,
and I did that. I washed them really well. I set them out to dry right in between that point of when they're drying, but you want to get them before they start to go soft again, right? And so I put them in a plastic bag, and I put like a tea cloth, like, a dish cloth, and like a drying dishcloth. And I ended up having to throw the entire bag out because the carrots stuck to the cloth, mold on the cloth, mold on the carrots. And I'm just like, nope, I'm not dealing with any of it.
yeah,
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna say variety. I just don't know.
doing too much, man. I think that,
Really. I think I did everything that you just did.
I
Instead
didn't
of
put a tea
a
cloth
paper
in.
towel,
Yeah.
I
And
use a cloth.
yeah, the cloth holds a lot of water. I don't know. That's what I do. I've never had an issue. I definitely have had them go a little bit soft, but
Hmm.
yeah.
I have some ideas about how I'm gonna still try to store them because I've seen it happen. Literally, how many times you've bought a bag of carrots in the store and it's like they've started to grow hairs. There's no mold on them yet,
No.
So like I know it's possible. It just didn't work out
Yeah.
this year or last year. So
Well,
all right.
good.
So we're gonna move on to your next
I'm
one.
nervous.
Yeah, you should be. I'm nervous for this one.
Oh gosh.
All right. So give David complete control over one garden bed. Correction. Give young David complete control over one garden bed. You even made a note to say it was going to be a 6 by 3 foot bed.
Yeah.
All right. So real rapid fire. So the struggle seemed to have been around like him wanting to grow like anything in the bed. And you're like, well, yeah, son, you kind of can't. That's David is his son. So you kind of can't just grow anything. You can't grow watermelons in January.
Yeah.
So you were like, you're going to give him a list of things for the appropriate season to grow, let him pick for it, pick from it. And then you also wanted to kind of maybe get him into less of just the picking and more of a little bit of the maintenance. Final note, this is why you don't put me in charge of episodes. We never even get to the part. Final note was you said only if he wants to.
Yeah. Yeah. So he definitely wanted to. And so that was the 6 by 3 bed that we had the winter carrots, and then he went in and he planted the spring carrots.
Hmm.
And if you're not watching, sorry, but that was about what I got out of them.
Yeah.
There's this is a tough one too, because I had gone into the goal with the intention of like picking the bed that would be the most productive, that
Mm-hmm.
would do something, and then it just kind of fell flat. And he didn't go out and do what he was supposed to do by any stretch of the imagination. So there was that. There was a time where it was like, hey, we need to go out and thin the carrots.
Yeah.
He didn't do that. I did thin them, but I think because of the lack of production in that garden bed, it was just tough. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think, see, now I should have taken pictures of it.
Mm-hmm.
We let the carrots grow for the majority of the summer, and they didn't really do much, if anything at all. I mean, that's why this year I'm going to go back and do the Danvers that we're selling in our store. I'm just going to grow those because those have been the best producing carrots I've ever grown.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to do that. But yeah, I was talking to him the other day. I talked to my son. My son's 10 years old, by the way. He's growing like a
I've seen
weed.
it happen.
Yeah, it's
I
crazy.
you have a witness.
Yeah, the other day he had to go to school, and it was it was like Spirit Week for Christmas or whatever, and he had a shirt on. He got a new button up. So in my family, when we dress up, we wear Hawaiian shirts. It's like that's what my family's always done. So we got him a Christmas Hawaiian shirt. Well, it's a little bit long, and he
Mm-hmm.
buttoned it up all the way to the top. And I was like, damn, you look like you're about 7 feet tall. He's not as tall as me yet, but he's
Mm-hmm.
definitely growing. But he's expressed to me this year that he wants to be a cabbage farmer and a watermelon farmer.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that knowledge, we can hopefully move those garden. But see, everything's hinging around this wild garden. We're going to hopefully get him into the cabbage in the spring, and then we can transfer over to the water. So I'm glad we actually went over this because it'll allow me to really adjust it and give it a second go. But yeah, we didn't really do it, and I think it was most part of it was him falling off, but then the other part was the garden just wasn't really producing like we wanted. So if I had to give myself a grade on that, probably give myself a D, a solid D.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe even a D minus if we want to get real technical. So it is what it is. But I think also, when kids are young, they want to be really involved in the garden, and then they kind of get older and they kind of wane from it. And I just don't want to push him to do,
Mm-hmm.
like I was out working in the beehives the other day, and I was like, you want to be a farmer? I was like, you gonna have bees on your farm? He's like, I only want like 4 hives or something. And I'm like, well, it starts at 4, and he's like, yeah, So, and he told me, I remember this. He told me in the spring. He said, my carrots aren't doing well, Daddy. What did I do wrong? And I said, well, you didn't really do anything wrong. And I explained to him the whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, well, let me help you with the bees then instead. And so he helped me with the bees. Now, to put motivation in, do you need to wipe your eyes?
I'm waiting on Leonard to take the camera off of me again.
There, how's that? So I told him, I said, look, if you help me with the bees from start to finish, I'll give you $1 per bottle sold, right? So he says, okay. So he goes through, he helps everything, and I come to him, he gets off the school bus, and I said, it's time to harvest the honey. We got to extract it. And I know I'm getting off from him, but this is kind of shows the priorities of a child. And he goes, I want to go out and play. And I said, if you don't help me, you don't get paid. And he said, okay. And he went out and played. So my wife and I extracted it. At the end of the summer, I told him, I was like, you could have made about $300 that day. And he was like, and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. So, it's starting to learn. So it's all these, because we made about 300 bottles of honey last year. So it's all about like getting it. So he says he wants to be involved. So we'll see. It will not be a goal this year, but as typical with the rest of the goals over the years, it kind of just goes to the next year. So it's
Yeah.
not a top priority, but it will continue to be. And again, it's as much as he wants to do. Like I'm not going to force, because look, I'll eat the hell out of watermelon. I don't care.
I'm just a blubber mess. I just can't. All
And we haven't even hit New
uh,
Year, New Batavia yet.
no. I was telling my colleagues, like, I don't know when she loads. Normally she comes in. It's unexpected, but you'll know when you see her. Um, so when you were talking about, like, whether or not he really is going to want to do it, it's exactly what I thought it was going to be. It's not necessarily that he doesn't want to do it, it's he wants to do something else. He wants to go play, which I think is just, in this day and age, he's talking about going outside and playing, because I know
Yes.
this about y'all. And that just this continues to warm my heart. When you were first talking about this today, I was thinking about, so I've had, you know, probably close to 100, if not more, of ideas when it comes to, let me try, I wonder if I could do this. I wonder if I could do that. And I've thought
Yeah.
in a particular garden, separate idea, garden bed, like growing things that I know that a group of friends and family like. And those things didn't exactly work out. And I know the why. It's a good example of like what young David experienced. Sometimes you come in hot, people really are involved in it, but they're never going to be involved in the same way that you are when you walk out of your house to go to through your yard, right?
Right.
And I realized that a friend told me this years and years ago, unrelated to gardening, but it definitely does apply. You have to meet people where they are, you know? And so with that, it's very easy for me to say, well, yeah, if you want to do this, think about like with training, you know, we're in the new year, a lot of fitness goals are out there. Like, all right, meet me at the gym every Saturday at this time. Like, I could do things like that with the garden, but am I now twisting people's arms to do the thing? I want you to want it. What was the name of that? The breakup with Jennifer Aniston and what's the guy's name? Vince Vaughn. I want you to want to take out the garbage. Like I want you
Yeah.
to weed the garden. Like, yeah.
Well, and I think it's unrealistic. I mean,
Hmm.
you can't put anybody on a schedule.
Yeah.
He's my son. This is going to come out wrong, but this is the only way now to say it. I can do what I want. I can
Hmm.
have him do what I want, but it's only for a finite amount of time.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem was, with the carrots, you don't see what's going on.
Hmm.
And and there's such a gap in between. Like it's not active enough to where it's like, hey, let's go out on, like you said, let's go out on Tuesdays and see what we
Hmm.
can do. Like you can do that at first, but then it's like it goes weeks. I mean, sometimes you know how it is. You plant a garden, you could walk away for 2 weeks and not even look at it sometimes, and it wouldn't be much of an issue. But then you go back and you're like, well, now I have to do this, and so it comes and goes. It ebbs and flows, and it's tough to get a 10-year-old in that mode. And the other problem is I'm here and I'm running it myself. And
Yeah.
so when I see something that needs to get done, I'm like, well, I'm going to go ahead and do it.
You're
And I
more
need to
inclined to
kind
do it.
of
Yeah.
back off and just say, hey, but at the same time, when you're working in a small space, every square foot matters.
Hmm.
And I can't let it go to waste because that's our family's food. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it is what it is. I think if I catch it at the right time and I get my cabbages in the ground at the right time and I can get them to run it as it progressively gets warmer and warmer, I think I can catch them. But he has stated that he wants to do it, so we'll see. But enough of
Yeah.
that. Let's go into
Okay.
yours because I don't want to go on about my solid D minus.
Well, all right. Number three. And that's D as in David, not B as in Batavia
Yeah.
or builder. So consume slash waste. He could have at least Leonard could have organized these where it was like you made it, you didn't, he knows which ones we hit as far as these goals. This is a lot of like, under 70% passing rate for these goals. Consume slash waste. So the sub bullets are eat from the garden every week. Be very, very intentional about what I'm consuming. There are two varies. That's a quote. So we talked about like I'm not focused on zero waste, and how this is. And you added this note when we were talking. Like this is more of a kind of lifetime goal, right? Clearly we're not growing food to continue to waste it, and this is a hard one to kind of grade myself on, or even it's not a happy one, right? It's not necessarily like a really, really fun goal anyway, but it's realistic when it comes to like, again, you don't want to be growing food just to throw it away or waste it. And it's hard for me to really judge this one. So maybe I'll what I think happened, and you can tell me how well you think I did or didn't do on it. We talked about the cucumbers, about how I don't remember if I gave 70 or 80%, like vast majority of my cucumbers last year were bitter waste, right?
Yeah.
So,
So in the last episode we did where you talked about that was actually this
mhm.
is where you lost internet connection. So if
Oh,
you
okay.
could give us like a minute worth of what happened
Yeah.
just so
If I
people
could
could catch up. Yeah.
relive the trauma of the
Yeah.
cucumber, sure, absolutely. I'll do
All
that
for
for
the
y'all.
public. It's okay.
No, good call out about, yeah. So apologies for the internet connection woes. We're trying to work through some of that as we are on the videos. So cucumbers, I wanted to do about 12 jars, like 12 quart-sized jars of refrigerator pickles. That was my only goal. Of course, I was going to eat some cucumbers fresh. So I planted cucumbers in two places. And from the very first cucumber to like some of the final ones that I harvested, the very first one was bitter. The majority of the cucumbers were bitter. I was cutting and tasting every single cucumber. Now, I didn't look up any more after we talked about it in one of the last episodes last year, but I'm attributing it to inconsistent watering. Young Bien added, stress for plants can lead to some bitterness. That was something that he had read on as well. I think they're kind of one and the same. So inconsistent watering can stress the plants out. And it was just really, really frustrating. I didn't get to the 12 jars of pickles. I didn't share this then, but I also I screwed up the vinegar water ratio. So my brine solution was kind of off. So the cucumbers that I did turn into pickles weren't the best that I've had. I am eating those, so I am consuming those. But generally speaking, it was kind of like I mentioned cucumbers mean summer. They mean a garden. They were the first thing I grew in, one of the first things in my very first garden. So it holds a special place for me, and I really enjoy them. Now, on the flip of it, I did also have cucumbers all the way up until like early November. A few here or there because the last fall was kind of really, really weird. But anywho, so cucumbers were an example of some waste. I just shared about the carrots, right? You end up throwing a lot of those out. Probably about as many tomatoes died on my dining room table as normal each year. So I didn't eat from, it's kind of pretty clear if I met this goal or not, as I say it out loud. I didn't eat from the garden every week, like I said I would, but I did eat from the garden a lot, so for whatever that's worth.
You know what I'm struggling with right now?
What's that?
I got so many Seminole pumpkins
Mhm.
that I'm trying to eat them. Because some of them have been on the shelf for a couple months now. I'm trying to eat them before they go to waste, and proven to be difficult. So I'm with you on this.
Yeah.
It's a tough sell.
Yeah. There's a strategy that I'm sure some people enlist outside of dropping them off at neighbors' doorsteps for those crops that are really prolific. So when you hit the Seminole pumpkin lottery, right? You've had this with butternut squash before,
Mm-hmm.
cucumbers, zucchini, if they don't, succumb to, that little bastard. Like these are things that are truly, truly prolific. And some of these things aren't the easiest to consume, like, every day, every week, or whatever have you. So that's something to be said. I don't know. I haven't decided where I'm going to land for cucumbers this year.
Right.
I'm kind of not going to make a big deal out of it, but I'm also kind of like, there's a lot of time. I spent more time tasting cucumbers that were bitter than I
Yeah.
probably did doing anything in the garden. So there's that.
What
So yeah,
variety
that's a
did you
little bit of
grow?
a womp womp. I think I just need to look at that goal and maybe refine it a little bit more.
What variety did you grow?
I did the national pickling cucumber, and I did a kind of slender Japanese style cucumber. I can't remember the variety. And then I did one kind of random hybrid. And we had mentioned it. You probably heard it, or maybe you didn't hear it. I did everything from harvesting them really small. I found that they tasted much better when I did a deep watering, and then like within the next week, I picked cucumbers. Right when the weather cooled off, when we had that weird bit in Chicago of like October was super mild. I had blossoms in October and cucumbers produced. All of those were just fine, were crisp. But again, think about how the weather is like really mild,
Yeah.
right? There's no real hot heat coming in, right? So yeah, I mean, across the varieties, the only ones that I didn't get that were like the slender Japanese cucumbers were never bitter. That's the only one. And I did, oh yeah, I did
Winner,
also
winner,
did a
chicken dinner.
the straight eight too.
Yeah, and that worked out all right.
No, all of them had a bout of bitter besides the Japanese style one.
Okay.
And I noted before, now I don't know which parts the folks didn't hear it or did hear, but I'll wrap it up here. I have never had this ever in my garden before.
Yeah, I don't like national pickling cucumbers. I've grown
Mhm.
them,
Yeah,
and they're
that sounds familiar.
way too susceptible to pests. So
All
I
right,
just moved
let's
on.
move on to a goal that I'm confident that you hit. All right, minimize the dearth. And I asked you in the episode like 3 times what the hell that word was. And then I still had, when you said it, I still had to look it up on the internet when I was listening back to the episode. So litter for me, put in parentheses, dry spell. Dearth, Dearth. You even spelled it. I'm still like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. So
Yeah.
dry spell. These are your
So
quick notes. Recognize a need for this last year. So in 2023, you recognize a need for it. I'll shorten this. The whole time period was spring and early fall. The end of spring and early fall had been periods of time where you had probably less than you to like in the garden.
yeah. So if you don't know what a dearth is a period where you don't get a harvest. We use that term for the bees. There's no nectar. There's no food. It's called a dearth. It's called the nectar dearth. So we definitely in the spring we hit it pretty good. I'm trying to think back. The only hiccup in the spring was we had this raccoon that just kept eating our tomatoes. So that was an issue. But outside of that, we were able to we were able to consume from our garden from, I'd say, late February all the way up until, this is a hard one, I'd say about July before things started getting a little bit weird, maybe even August. And then it fell off. So a lot of things happened this year. And, one thing that's important to realize with all of this stuff is sometimes it's out of your control. And that's exactly what happened here. We had basically the only time we got rain this summer and even in the fall is when a tropical system came by. And so we would get huge amounts of rain and then we get absolutely nothing. And this was the first time in a long time that I've actually seen my grass brown in the summer. So, we literally didn't get much rain at all. So that made it a little bit difficult. And then the heat kind of persisted. And so in the fall, what ended up happening was we would break down. I'm trying to think. We had 2 beds of corn. One bed failed. The other bed was popcorn. So, I'm not even going to count it because what the hell am I going to do with some popcorn? I won't be growing that again. And it's not popping quite right. The kernels didn't mature as good like they were supposed to. So we got a little bit greedy and said, hey, we're going to leave some stuff in. And I did something too in the year where I was testing monocropping across the board. And I monocropped all beds and it didn't really work out like I wanted it to. So we had some failures in there in specifically our pepper bed ended up kind of failing on us to an extent. We got harvest off of it, but it didn't last. Usually our peppers will go from spring all the way up into fall, and it didn't happen this year. And that was because of the monocrop. I'm fairly certain. So when I say dearth, what I don't mean an absolute feast, like breaking the dearth with a feast. What I mean is harvesting something and, eating a couple peppers a week or something. And really that didn't work out because we had those key crops not make it. We didn't do a fall tomato planting, which was a mistake. Our peppers didn't do great, but we did have Seminole pumpkins producing all the way through. And not to mention another thing that happened was our black-eyed peas were on our back trellis. And I've had this notion for a couple years again that it just doesn't get enough sun. And that was absolutely the case. So we eliminated our black-eyed peas that we would be getting. So with all that said, there were some hiccups, but in the grand scheme of things, we made 50% of it, which, if I'm going to give myself a letter grade here, I can't give myself a 50%. You know what I'm saying? Like we actually eliminated part of this dearth period. So, I'd say it's probably about a C I would give myself, but it's definitely tricky to do it because, and I wrote this note earlier for a show that we'll end up doing, I'm sure, but when we're planting a garden, the harvest days to harvest matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we need to understand. And I definitely want to dive into that a little bit more and how I plan to, and I mean, hopefully Batavia will be down. We'll discuss it later, but apply this to our garden and make a change. And, we're working on that, but yeah, we missed the buck. I mean, we went solid, probably September, no, probably late August, all the way until November before we harvested anything else. Now, part of that is because my theory of like rip it out and put fall in is as part of it as well. So
Okay.
it's a little bit of a mixed bag.
So when Batavia directs the episode, we go kind of long. So we're going kind of long. I just want to make a quick comment on um, the dearth. I'm never going to say that outside of this moment. So you talked about how you wanted to focus on, let me see what the note that letter gave me was. Succession planting, harvest times, and crop selection, and how those things were going to help you accomplish it. And and I'm going to fold this into my next goal. I really believe that we underestimate the value in all three of those things. So how do you know unless you know, right? Some of these things are natural. I know when I plant my tomatoes, when I'm going to start getting the first red tomato. I know that based on the years I've grown tomatoes, based on the value tomatoes are for me. And so it's ingrained. But there's probably 10 other crops that I'm kind of like, wait, when do I normally pull those out? Like over time, again, you figure that part out. I know when my garlic is going to be ready versus when I actually pull it out. Like I know these things. So my next goal was documenting, and the short sub bullets were like when I'm starting things, when I'm planting them out, when I am harvesting things, which is the part that I failed on. Um, when I the list of goals, like documenting those, which is ironic because yeah, we documented them, never looked at them.
Right.
But this was the first year I had someone in it was a short for sweet potatoes that I created when I was starting my slips, but not planting them out yet. I was still in the basement. And the person asked, when did you start them? I'm in a similar climate as you. And I kept on saying to myself, oh, let me go and look at my spreadsheet because I documented that. And that kind of stuff drives me crazy not knowing it. That's another reason why it was important for me to document it. It really is the kind of beginning of me creating the archive, right? And that's important for me as a gardener because it, in my mind, will help me not make some of the same mistakes over and over again because I will have the data, right? Again, an undervalued tool. And I know that I fought the idea of notebooks and all of that for years and years and years. And I still fight it because, I rage against the machine. But when it comes to these components, the varieties, like Young being asked about the cucumbers, what varieties are working, what varieties aren't, when are you planting them, what seasons do they do well in versus not, like all of that stuff matters. And it matters for you in your area. That's the reason why you just can't Google the thing and figure out the right answer,
Yeah.
right? All right.
Well,
Any comments on that before I move on to your next one?
yeah, let me say this. When it comes down to it, there's a key word that is like a gotcha word, and it's synergy, right?
Mm.
I hate that word. It's stupid, but it's true. And all of these things matter. And, harvest time, planting date, crop selection, variety, like everything like works in harmony into your garden. And I mean, the one way that we do that is, using tools to help us get there. And the planner app is one of those tools. When we go into and we start planning our gardens like Batavia and I are currently already doing, honestly, it helps with us because you can go through and we can look at they got so many varieties on there. It's absolutely ridiculous. And we can go through and see the harvest date, the planting times, and go through each variety and find you can get early varieties, late producing varieties, very productive varieties. There's all kinds of things you can do. So the Planner app supports this, it sponsors the show. We're huge thank you to them. If you would like to get the Planter app, there's a discount code below to get you a very healthy discount on a lifetime membership of the Planter app. Very visual drag and drop interface. It's on Google and Apple Play stores. So use the link below. It's the Planter app, the PLANTER app. And it really does make a difference because you start talking about this synergy that you're creating, and it's hard to do so with, without a little bit of a push. And it's like you said, when to harvest a tomato, but I mean, can you keep up with every single thing? Like my Brussels sprouts, for instance, I had a successful harvest one time in 5 years. I don't know when my Brussels sprouts are going to be ready, and to have something to give you a little bit of a push and say like it gives you a window, then that will help you with that. So
yeah. When I started documenting this more closely, I, through our conversations as well, realized when my tomato plants kind of stopped producing, there was not a bounty of them anymore. And so with that data, it was helpful for me to understand, okay, this will influence what I do next in the garden. Right. All right. So there's not a lot of build up to this one. Your next one is you're going to try to make hot sauce.
Oh, I failed.
Okay.
I failed. Right. Yeah. I got a big fat F. Yeah. So okay. Yeah, it is okay. It's gotta be, because it's what happened. So
was it tied to the pepper struggles that you said you had?
Yeah, it was tied to this pepper struggles to an extent. It's one of those things preserving, it's serious because I put my hand up to my lip and stroke my beard. It gets very difficult. So it's one of those things when you're preserving, you want to get enough so you can make a healthy batch. And we were getting a lot of mango peppers, which was my target. I was targeted. I had mango peppers and peach peppers. Well, the peach peppers didn't taste like peach at all, so I scrapped that. And that was out of my control. So we were done with those peach peppers. They tasted like, truth be told, they tasted like ass. So we went on to the mango peppers, and I just couldn't get my hands on enough to justify making it. It's going to be continued into next year, but again, the plants didn't produce continuously like I wanted them to, like you need them to, quite frankly. It's not want. When you're preserving, you need them to produce. And so it didn't really give me that. So yeah, I did not make hot peppers at all. And I continuously I talked to a few people. So it's on the list, but I'm going to have to pick. If I'm going to do it, I need to pick a very prolific, simple pepper to get started. Yeah. That's what I want to do. A cayenne pepper. I said I would never grow another Tabasco pepper again because they're such a pain in the ass to harvest, but it may have to happen just because it's a simple pepper with no complex flavors, and you get a lot of them. Yep. So, and then the other thing is my food processor died. And I'm too cheap to buy a new one, so there's there's that.
Yeah, that was on. I was waiting for Santa to bring me a new food processor, so there's that. All right, so honorable mentions, the quick version of it. Give me a moment. For you, it was wildflower garden and using cover crops, and for me, it was to grow all of the herbs, which I kind of think I just added to the list with you. Yeah. There was no delay. I just, self beeped there. So for me, I'm ending on a high note. So I listed a bunch of these herbs. What I barely grew or didn't grow was cilantro, dill, rosemary, and chamomile. Right. So either I didn't grow them at all or it just barely grew. But the wins were the sage, the parsley, the oregano, the mint, the basil. I did that whole container garden bench along the fence.
I thought you said another B word.
No, not this time. Batavia the builder built a bench. I say that 4 times real fast. And yeah, absolute win. For time's sake, we won't talk about how much I use out of those versus, how much were just pretty. So I'll let you wrap up with wildflower garden and then cover crops, which I know you're dying to talk about.
Yeah. So the wildflower garden, I made it. I planted it, and we had, albeit not a lot, we definitely had wildflowers growing in it. So the process was started. I went back in the fall, and after I saw what happened, and now hindsight's 2020, and I put a lot of I got a load of donkey manure, and so I put a load of that in. And what I probably ended up doing is going back to square one meaning all the seeds that fell that I wanted to reseed, they're not going to get light. They're not going to, so I'm going to have to start over a bit, but I'm creating more rich soil. So it's a little bit hit or miss. So it was definitely, I don't remember, and correct me, Batavia, if I'm wrong, but I don't think I said I need to have a thriving wildflower garden. I just said I was going to create,
No,
yeah.
no,
So,
literally, that was like the sentence.
yeah.
And then you did talk a bit more about cover crops.
Yeah. And so I did that. And then cover crops actually was an overwhelming success. We did cover crops. So the bed and this will be in my rotation henceforth. I like using that word hence. It makes me feel like I'm smarter than I am.
Mhm.
We put yeah, really. I put buckwheat in behind my potatoes, and that actually did really well. The bees loved it. The pollinators loved it. I did have a hiccup where I missed harvesting it before it reseeded. It didn't reseed real bad. We had a hurricane come, and it was like right in that window. I was trying to time it just right, and so I couldn't get out there. So we had that. That did really well. And then actually in the wild garden, I just kind of gave up on it and ended up cover cropping it with buckwheat as well. And I did it later than I should have, so it didn't do as when you plant them in the fall, the plants don't get as tall. So in the summer, the buckwheat was like 2-3 feet tall. In the fall, it was like 6 inches to a foot. But we definitely had blooms, and it was helping. So yeah, it did really well. We used, and I didn't do anything intense. I did a bag of wildflower, like cheap wildflower. I think most of it's
Mhm.
probably sand. And then I threw a bag of zinnias out, and just was like, hey, if it's going to grow, grow. But I made this space specifically for it. So we're going to do that. We're also going to expand on this a little bit. And so where the wild garden was, we are going to do cover crops as wildflowers. So we're going to use that. And then in that other area, we're probably going to do a mixture. So I'll probably throw some of the buckwheat, because the buckwheat is really important. I know a gentleman, he's an older gentleman, and he's told me time and time again, when he grows buckwheat, he has the most fall honey. So we're going to try and, reproduce that and make it happen. So we're going to spread the love that way and just kind of build that area out appropriately. There's going to be a little bit of restructuring going on.
Mhm.
But this is part of, and I know we did that episode recently where it was like it was a subscriber episode where we were talking about our plans in the future. And this is how it starts. You just make that bed and you work on it and you work on it. And the ultimate goal here is, and there's no spoilers for my next year's goals, but the ultimate goal is to have a self-seeding wildflower garden to an extent. That's the ultimate goal, where it's just kind of on cruise control. You water it in the spring, maybe water it every once in a while in the summer, but otherwise it would self-seed and regrow and just kind of let it do its thing. I think it's a pipe dream. I don't know if it's something that's really sustainable. I've done a lot of reading about self-sowing plants, and it doesn't self-sow like you would think. So
Mhm.
it won't be as much, but in time we can build that. Basically, instead of building a weed seed bank, we're going to want to build a wildflower seed bank. And it's just going to take time to work. So we've got the manure out there. It's been out there for a couple months. And I need to get out there and kind of mix it around and then just kind of go at it again. The one thing I've learned is zinnias are pretty, but pollinators don't really need them.
Mhm.
They don't really do a whole lot. So we need to kind of graduate from that a little bit. But other than
Yeah.
that, I think it was a success.
Okay. Talk about wrapping up on a win. A couple of questions, real quick. Did she say donkey manure?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And when you talk about self sowing for the wild, like flowers and such, these aren't perennials. These are quite
Annuals.
literally going to seed. The annual seed drops, and
Mm-hmm.
then again, it's self sowed or self seeded, and then they grow back. I have every year. dill that I don't plant. I grew it one year, and it starts in the spring, very early, excuse me, and cilantro as well, and then mustards as well. But they grow in a similar area, but they aren't necessarily growing in the same exact area. So I can see with, you know, different plants, vegetables or flowers kind of are different, but I could see how that could be trouble when it comes to the space and making sure those seeds actually come up in the place you want them to come up to.
Yeah, well, and I think part of it too is just throwing that out the window and saying like, I don't care where it comes up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless, and this would be a really expensive way to do it,
Yeah.
unless I bought bags of certain seeds, you know, and I'm just going to throw names out there. Don't hold me to any of this, but like Cosmos or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any other ones off the top of my head. But anyways, you know, sunflowers, zinnias, and you seeded like big patches of them. Then eventually they would all grow in together, but you would still have, in theory, you would have patches of these flowers growing. But that would be an incredibly expensive way to fill up, you know, a big space. So I don't know if that's the way I want to do it. I know I have a vision in my head that looks like Martha Stewart's house or P. Allen Smith, but then I also know that the reality of what's going to happen is it's going to look like a wild field, and I'm okay with that too. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll start with the vision and try and get there, but whatever happens, happens. I've come to a limit of what I can take care of that doesn't produce me food, and I have to be on par with that.
Mm-hmm. I do. I have comments around the flowers and the wildness of those flowers, but I'll save that for a different conversation. Maybe I'll sprinkle that into our next subscriber episode.
Okay, let's do it. All right, everybody. So that being said, um, those are our goals from last year in the year of our Lord 2024. So we will come back at you. We'll have more episodes in between, but we are going to reevaluate, come back with our goals, and see if we can meet them for this year. It's a good practice to have. We highly recommend that everybody does this. And if you would like to support the show, again, please buy some seeds from us. We've got a whole line of seeds from spring, summer, fall. Doesn't matter. We got them all. We got all your basic seeds plus some multicolored tomatoes, and we try to give large quantities. So do that. The discount code is YBBBB, and that will give you a discount. $35 or more order will get you free shipping. The link is below, and we hope to be supplying your garden. I know we just packaged a few that were full gardens, so thank you very
Mm-hmm.
much to those people, and get the planner out. And otherwise, remember, on this show, we do two things. We learn to grow, and we grow for change.
Mm-hmm. See ya.